Welcome to Stories of Transformation. This is a Boonachepresents production filmed at Berkeley Community Media, a beautiful nonprofit here in the city of Berkeley. I am standing in for Boonachima for this month's episode of Stories of Transformation. We have as guests some incredible changemakers, young changemakers in our communities, Sam and Emma, and I want it to go directly into why they're here and what they are doing in our community. So let me introduce you to Sam first.
Hi, nice to be here.
Sam.
Nice to be here.
So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and a little bit about your background.
Well, I was adopted as an orphan in Bombay, India, and I was adopted by Americans. And I was in India in an orphanage till I was the age of 1.5, until my parents came and got me, my adopted parents. And I was primarily raised at our house in San Jose, but I oftenly stayed with my aunt and uncle in San Francisco, so I would often be back and forth. So personally, I consider San Francisco my home.
All right.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you may have had, the rewards and the challenges of your growing up here.
I think as an adoptive child, as an only child, and as a person of color in my community, it was pretty hard to really adjust to the lifestyle and really fit in. And I often got bullied when I was little, but that kind of led into me wanting to be something more. And I really idolized some of my family members who grew up picking cotton in Fresno, and I wanted to see how much I could apply that. So when I was 19 years old, I enlisted in the Army, and I served my time to try and see how I could bring back and eventually make some change later on.
Thank you for your service. We're going to go to Emma right now, and she's going to tell us a little bit about your background, Emma.
Thanks, Janie, for having us tonight.
Sure.
So I grew up in Northern California. My mom lives in Mendocino, a town of 1,008 people. And my dad lives in Davis, California with his wife. They got divorced when I was very young, and so I don't actually remember them ever being together. My whole life has been just splitting between the two homes, which I feel like they did a really remarkable job of doing successfully. I went to school mostly at my mom's house growing up, and then would spend summers and weekends at my dad's, which was a 4-hour commute. So that was sometimes trying, but generally I really think that it ended up being a good experience for me, getting to experience two different worlds. And my dad's a professor, and so seeing him do his work there and spending time in that community. Then my mom is a lawyer, and so in a town of 1,008, that means that she's connected to quite a few people. She's been doing it for 30 years. So seeing her influence there also, I feel lucky to have spent time in both places with both sets of parents.
What about those tender years, those preteen, teenager years? How did you guys survive those, and what were some of the challenges and the rewards of being a teenager in San Jose, right? And you grew up in which city?
Both of them, I guess.
And both of them. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I guess in San Jose, I used to make up imaginary worlds and stuff like that. I was very much into sci-fi and playing with medieval dragons and stuff like that. That was my escape. But also whenever I came to San Francisco, it just was like a place where I could explore versus San Jose. San Jose was a really closed community. There's trails, but in San Francisco, it was where I could let loose, really get my imagination going when I was a little kid. And everything in the big buildings, it was intimidating, but it was awesome at the same time.
Wow, that sounds really good. How about you, Emma?
My teenage years, I think it was a lot about connection. I think that's when I really started to realize how important it was for me to have relationships with my peers. And I would have long phone calls, for hours into the night with the same friend, actually, for a while. My mom called them my nightly check-ins. And then also connections with my mom and her women friends, who were just they were all powerhouses, all of her women friends. And so having them as role models and people who were very subtly coaching me, because teenagers, don't necessarily want any noticeable coach.
Right.
But the subtle kind of help.
Do
was
you
great.
recognize them as lessons? Like, did they teach you some lessons? You remember that? Maybe you didn't call them lessons when you were in the experience itself, but what was like a major lesson for you from that, being engaged with the women like that?
I think that they taught me to listen and to be respectful of people who have more experience than I do.
Right.
And learning to switch the way that I think about things to accommodate people around me. So if one of them was very, very, very progressive, sometimes that was a little off-putting, but then I would sort of switch and be able to relate to her.
Wow,
and then
that's great.
Talking to someone who's more conservative, learning to listen and relate to them.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you both for telling us a little bit about where you came from. But you guys are in like this super cool organization right now. It's called Coro, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Would you let us know how you got there and what is Coro?
I'll start with talking a little bit about what Coro is.
Sure.
So Coro was founded about 70 years ago. And first let's talk about the word itself.
Yeah.
C-O-R-O, but it doesn't stand for anything.
Yes. No acronym, right?
It's just
yes.
a word.
Yes.
And the organization is nonprofit and nonpartisan. And their goal is to help shape the future changemakers and make them better leaders and public servants of the future.
Okay.
So it started out with a 9-month program for about 12 individuals who had recently graduated from college. And they now also have a program for high school students and a program for mid-career professionals.
Wow, so they've grown over the years.
They have, yeah.
Excellent.
And San Francisco is where it was founded, so it's pretty cool to be a part of it here in this city.
How hard is it to get into Coro?
It depends. It really depends on how comfortable you are with yourself. Because the goal of Coro is to actually see the bigger picture. What you're comfortable with is something that they're going to take, and they're going to see if they can push you outside of your comfort level and see how you can see the bigger picture. Because at the end of the day, seeing both sides is what Coro is really about, to make new change leaders, civic leaders of the future. And like when you apply, you just fill out the application. If you get past the vetting process, then you go to an interview.
Yeah.
And that interview is pretty mind-boggling. They'll really poke and prod you and see what you're all about.
Wow.
And then through that.
It sounds like a very competitive program.
I think it's competitive, but it's definitely doable.
Yes.
Yeah.
I applied twice, actually. I wasn't selected my first time.
Yeah.
But it ended up being something that I was still committed to, and so I did the entire process a second time.
Yes.
And we actually are going to put a link in the description to the application and the website, so if you're interested at all, you should take a look.
Absolutely, yes. You guys are both in internships right now, right? So would you let us know about how that's going?
Yeah, so we'll do 5 different placements or internships over the course of the 9 months. And so we're both in our first placement. And I'm actually interning with Boonachepresents as my first placement.
Happy to have you, Emma.
Happy to be with you.
Yeah.
It's been really, really lovely. I'm enjoying my first placement a lot.
Yeah.
And my placement is with the San Francisco GOP.
Okay.
So I'm actually a policy analyst.
That must be the button that you have.
No. But then again, it's all about my task is to make a budget white paper on the San Francisco budget to analyze what are the major factors, what are we missing, what can we learn from, and how to analyze it.
That's a big job, especially San Francisco, which has so many complexities in their budget.
And Coro knows, my ideology, and they took it and they put me in a totally different sector so I could experience it out of my comfort zone.
And how is that experience?
It's very interesting. I love seeing the big picture. It really engages you. So.
Well, good.
I guess what I've learned is, specifically with the SFGOP as well as the Democrats, is ideologically they're not very different. They're people who believe they're San Franciscans at the end of the day, and that's what they remember. And just having that kind of balance from both sides, I feel like me looking at it has been really important.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We're going to close out this segment with one question. For the kids who are interested in becoming a Coro Fellow, what advice do you have for them?
I'd say definitely just be true to yourself. The first part of the application has a couple of essays, and so just be honest. But then in particular on selection day, which is the day-long interview that Sam mentioned, it's really easy to feel like, oh, I need to be like this type of leader in order to be selected. And that's, you know, they're going to sense that's not genuine.
So be authentic.
Yeah, be yourself, and, you know, they're going to relate to that, and they're going to know that you're going to bring something unique to the table, and ultimately that's what they're looking for.
I'd say challenge everything. Challenge everything on selection day. Challenge everything where you are right now.
Yeah.
Challenge literally everything. Challenge your teachers. Challenge yourself more importantly, because when you do that, you discover what you're really passionate about. And if you show that passion to the people on selection day, you show it to Coro, Coro can understand that, and they want to promote that leadership.
That's really good advice. Thank you guys so much for coming. We're going to take a little break so that we can do some camera changing around and be right back. So welcome back to Stories of Transformation. We're going to continue with our storytelling from our young changemakers today on Stories of Transformation, Sam and Emma. And we're going to start with asking them some questions about life now in the city for a young person. Sam, let's start with you. Tell me about what it is to live in San Francisco right now in this climate.
I can say that as a lot of people know, the housing climate is very dreary, and it's not too optimistic for young folks to move to the city. For myself, affordability and the price and cost of living has always been high. As a recent college graduate, you know, I'm carrying debt over, and I'm trying to find a job that can support myself as well as sustain my lifestyle, which is to, you know, buy groceries, get the bare necessities.
Right.
And that translates down to everyone, not just college students, but just bare minimum people trying to live in the city. Costs are going up, housing's getting scarcer, and we're all trying to find a solution.
And what is your living situation?
Right now, I have a small apartment in the inner Richmond, which is a great neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I share it with 4 other individuals. They're all other students.
Wow.
And all of us split the cost of living. We split utilities, split, you know, power, everything. And it's close quarters, but we're kind of like a little family.
So can you tell us some of the challenges of living like what I call a community, which is one way of really having affordability in your life when you're in these high income cities, you know?
I think it's the difficulty is finding the sweet spot. I mean, as I mentioned to you earlier, there's one of my roommates who's mastered the art of coupons and Groupons. And I want to see how I can, you know, use that same method, because that's how she makes her lifestyle thrive. You know, she gets to go and, you know, experience different things in the city. And really understanding that is the way to go, rather than, you know, living paycheck to paycheck and not living life.
Exactly, yes. How about you, Emma? You also live in San Francisco, right? But in a totally different situation. Can you tell us?
I do, yeah. So I recently moved from Eastern Washington. And a typical rent for somebody would be maybe $400 a month.
Right.
And so moving to San Francisco.
That's really cheap. 400. Where can you find $400 a month?
In Walla Walla, Washington.
Wow.
And that's like, you know, 1 bedroom and like a pretty sizable home with maybe another roommate or 2. But
wow.
Yeah. And so coming to San Francisco, it was quite a shock. So I'm living in the Tenderloin in a studio apartment, so I'm living by myself. And that was a priority that I had, this program is a year long, and I knew that I'm naturally an introvert, so I'd prefer to be by myself at the end of a long day.
Yeah.
So in order to make that work, it means that I'm living, you know, in an area that's sometimes a little bit scary at night, or, you know, isn't always the cleanest, but I really I'm loving it quite a bit.
Well, many people want to live by themselves, but there's a sacrifice to living by yourself between 2 different lifestyles. What do you think you had to give up to be able to afford a studio in the Tenderloin?
I think, first of all, a lifestyle piece is connection to people. So for this year, I knew that with the Coro program, I'd be with 12 individuals.
Right.
So I'd have connection. But I wouldn't want to live like that long term, I don't think, because it could be isolating, I'm sure. And then, yeah, in terms of cost, of course, like splitting the rent between 2 people is going to be more affordable than just living alone.
Yeah. But you're telling me you're liking it, though.
I am. I'm loving it. I do a lot of like thrift store shopping for all my little decorations and everything, and try to keep track of money and try not to eat out, but rather cook meals for myself that will last for a couple of days, things like that.
Tell me what you guys see in the city, though. I think that you probably run across some conditions of poverty in the city. What are your ideas about that?
What always hits me, and it hits me hard, is the sense of how can I actually help them in a way that'll really help them. And I mean past the level of volunteering, past the level of, you know, handing out dinner to them, past the level of like, because I've worked in a homeless shelter in San Jose, and keeps hitting me when I want to say, like, to myself, like, what can I really do? Like, I'm not in their shoes, like Atticus Finch would say. I don't understand their world, you know, but I just, that's the biggest problem I see. And it's, you know, it's increasing in the city because we're pushing people out, people who live there.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest things I see at work. And it just puzzles me, how can I really get into their shoes and offer them a step up? How can I be a friend, but in the right way? And that's what I'm, you know, puzzling.
Have you come up with any solutions?
You know, there's on the policy side, you know, being a policy analyst, looking at, I guess, like the Care Not Cash and revising that so that we really create a partnership with homeless people right now and create a point where we can reward them when they start making progress towards jobs, when they start making progress. But the initial step is not alienating them. It's going further than just throwing money at these organizations and bringing them in, treating them as one of the family, like another fellow San Franciscan, and saying, we're there with you. And we'll keep on, you know, pushing you so that we believe in you, so you can find that job, and training them to that point, and, you know, step by step, sticking with them. That's what needs to happen at the very bottom level.
Supporting each other, supporting each other. Because if you do better, then I do better.
Yes.
Because we all do better when you do better.
And I think too, thinking about what structures, institutional structures are in place that is acting as a deterrent. So maybe it's somebody who is unemployed and therefore, you know, can't afford a house or can't afford rent, but and then ask yourself, like, why are they unemployed? And so digging a little bit deeper there, is it because that they don't have childcare? Is it because they don't have government ID? Is it because they don't have access to a suit to go to an interview or access to a computer to print out a resume? So like those are my questions that I want to ask of, like, what are these barriers to success that each individual is experiencing, and then, you know, what different like nonprofits or community groups can do to maybe address those like one at a time, to really help, you know, this person has this set of barriers and we're going to help you, and then this person has this set of barriers, let's work on those.
Yes.
Those are the questions that I want to ask.
Totally, that happens as far as organizations are concerned. And nowadays I think they're working on really helping a person where they're at and giving them as many resources that we can to help them address those barriers. But on the other hand, we as a community or even as a country do not provide housing or livable wage jobs for those same folks. So no matter how much you help a person prepare or how much they do for themselves, if there's not a job for them to plug into or affordable housing for them, then that's where there's such disparity. So it's okay to like help someone for many months to prepare, but you have to have something on the other end. So making those connections between industry and corporations and organizations might be one thing to consider. If I said the word community to you, community, what would that mean to you as a young person?
I think, to me, community is family. Just as much as we've forgotten that country is also family.
Yes.
And, you know, my background, I guess, you know, being in the military, people kind of like just make assumptions that it's a whole complex, it's a military-industrial complex. But at the end of the day, these are families. These are people that are just like you and me. These are people that were pushed out of their home, that were disowned, that didn't make it in school because their teachers didn't believe in them, and they're trying to support their family, their kids that are trying to grow up. These are people, brothers and sisters, and in my eyes, I see family and I see community.
Thank you, Sam. That's good. How about you, Emma?
Yeah, I guess maybe I take a little different approach to community, and I think about sort of my own community, and that's just my family, but then also, you know, my people that supported me as I was growing up, and that's one really strong community. And then people that I met and interacted with in college, and that's a community. And then the community of Coro Fellows that we're just getting to know, but that's a great community. And then through these internships or through Boonache Presents, these other communities that I'm tapping into and building relationships with.
Right.
And there's been research that shows, and I definitely relate to this, that community and connection leads to like life happiness, life success.
Yes.
So that's so key for me, is just acknowledging how important all of the people in my life are to keeping me successful and happy and healthy.
Right.
And how, making sure that I feel very blessed to have all of the connections I have, and continuing to reach out and form more communities.
Yes.
If I can add to that,
please.
Like you said, you mentioned San Francisco. What I see every time I take the bus is, it is kind of like a family, and sometimes there's beautiful moments when they all interact.
Right.
Like down to the people who are houseless, to the businessman, to the muni driver, to the police officer or policewoman. Everyone interacts in some way, and sometimes when we get to like joke around and just like on the muni, I see interactions that it just reminds me who like I'm fighting for, who I'm with, and I'm just a part of something.
Yes.
And that's sometimes we forget that, but sometimes we remember that, and that's what we can't forget.
Well, we're so bombarded by the news of all the really terrible things that we as people can do to each other. I love that scenario, just having a moment where we are all connected and actually enjoying life in that moment. That's good. That's good. Now, you mentioned college, but I want you to take me to college, because I'm really curious of what firsthand experience nowadays. Tell us which college you guys have been to, and then tell me a little bit about what that felt like.
I'd say we probably have actually some pretty disparate college experiences.
Yeah.
Not extremely, but somewhat. So I went to Whitman College, which is a small liberal arts school in Eastern Washington. So there were 1,500 students. And it is in the middle of nowhere. There are wheat fields all around us. So what that means is that, speaking of community, the students really have to look inward for entertainment and connection, because it's not like it's Berkeley, which is located in this huge metropolis, and you can go
to a bigger metropolis across the bay.
Yeah, it's really like, the people are the ones that you're living next door to or down the hall from, or, across the courtyard from, and that's it.
Wow.
So that leads to a very, very strong student community.
Yes.
And a very supportive community, a very connected community. People.
Was it diverse though, or no?
That they're working on it.
Okay.
It's liberal arts is pretty cost prohibitive.
Right.
So there's there's great scholarships, there's great financial aid. Students who graduate from Whitman end up with less debt than similar state schools, but it is still pretty expensive, and it's pretty far away. So that can also, a lot of students who have community at home in Southern California maybe don't want to go so far from home.
Tell me a little bit about what you're doing there. We had mentioned in the pre-interview that you were working with some folks.
So I was involved in working on LGBT equity and making sure students had access to all the same resources, and people were thinking about LGBT community, and then women as well, and making sure that women students were really speaking up and had their voices heard. And when I graduated, I was then employed by the college as a resident director.
Wow.
So I took care of a residence hall of 140 students for 2 years.
Okay.
And it was an all-women's residence hall. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what it means to be a college-age woman, what are the challenges that are facing them today, what are the inequities that still exist in society today for women, the access that they don't quite have, the fields that they're still not able to get jobs in, and then of course, with the media is very focused on this, but sexual assault on college campuses really negatively impacts women at a very disproportionate level.
Of course.
And so working with students to overcome these very serious personal crises while continuing to be a full-time student, and how do we navigate that?
We're going to go to Sam in a minute, but let me ask you a question. What was the major life lesson of that experience for you?
So I think that it's So sometimes working one-on-one with students, an individual can experience a pretty severe crisis, and that can be very debilitating for the student, for anyone that's helping them. But then looking at the bigger picture, after we overcome that, like what's the bigger work being done? And so for sexual assault, there's with all the media focus these days and President Obama focus, we're doing so much more to prevent sexual assault, and we're actually acknowledging that it's happening in a way that hasn't been done forever.
Needed.
And
it's needed,
it's
right?
Very needed. And so I think that that's sort of the silver lining, that with all of the focus, we're starting to make shifts and changes, and policies are changing. And so for the one young woman sitting in front of me, like this is a very, very tough moment. But for all of the women that will come in the coming years, like they're going to hopefully have fewer problems because we'll have made some changes to the way.
Because there were people who stepped out and decided this is enough. I'm going to do something about it. And I'm going to use my story to do that. Those are change makers.
They're very, very brave.
Very heroes, very brave. Thank you so much, Emma. How about you, Sam?
For college, I kind of bounced around. I had both like the experience in California. I started at freshman year at University of Hawaii, and then I came back to California. Vacation education now. Then I came back to community college, to De Anza Community College in in Cupertino. And then I came to UC Santa Barbara for my junior and my senior year. And experiencing the different levels, like state college, then UC, then community college, I didn't really have that much respect for a CC at the time. Like everyone had the stigma of, oh, you got to go straight to the UC and that's it. And that I grew up with that, but I grew out of it when I found true friends that helped me up when I was down at the CC, when I found instructors that really took the time to help me. And I didn't see that much at UH or at UC Santa Barbara, as much as I felt it at CC. And each one was a different family to me. But I can tell you that the type of dialogue, the social justice dialogue, at each one of these campuses varied. And personally, as a veteran who was also still an active reservist, I had to do like Guard, and I had to do National Guard mobilizations while in college. And I was also in residential housing at UC Santa Barbara, where I had to, be responsible for other students who looked up to me as a peer leader. But carrying a certain responsibility as a soldier and also being an RA and managing classes in a normal student lifestyle.
Wow, that's heavy duty.
It was hard to manage, I can be honest. But at the very core of it, I tried to summon the strength to, be a beacon for some of the students that I was around, so I could, be just like a friend to them rather than their RA. And that's what I fought for, pretty much.
I'd like to close with who inspires you and who you would like to inspire, because you're moving forward. This is like the rest of your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll start. So I've said for a number of years now that my mom is a big inspiration, but I honestly think that like every year I find just another like nugget of information that she taught me, or another story that she shared that just makes her an even bigger influence and inspiration in my life. And like I've written her, on Mother's Day every year, like, thank goodness you're my mom, you've been so valuable. And then the next year it's like, but you're even more valuable than you were last year. So she's my number one influence, and she's who taught me how important it is for women to be strong and powerful, and equals in the workforce and equals in social environments, everything. And then who I want to influence, I think, is the next generation of young women. So I have a couple of nieces. I have 3 nieces that are, heading into young adulthood, making sure that they feel, similar lessons, that they can be whoever they want to be, that they shouldn't let men shut them down, they shouldn't have their value and self-worth determined by their peers, but rather internally. And that's really a lot of the work that I want to do.
That's good learning.
I hope so.
As a mom, I feel like we wait for you to be at a point where you could understand a little bit more of what we said when you were 5. So it's like it's a wonderful feeling for us, for you to grow into the women that you are. So I have a beautiful daughter myself, very proud of her. And every year she grows, and then she, just like you said, it's like, oh, I get that now. And we love that part. How about you?
I can say my mom and my dad. They are my adopted family. But my mom, she grew up in the fields picking cotton. And there's a very big Latino community that she lived in Fresno, in Biola.
Yes.
And, yeah, and it's all Latino. But like my grandma and my mom's family, they went through true hardship. But my mom was the first one to push herself through college. She was the first one to get her master's in psychology, and she was the first one to reach out to the Latino
Congratulations,
community.
Mom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and and my dad too. He was an immigrant, came from India over, and then started studying engineering here, and really made something of himself. Very intelligent guy. And although I'm not related to them by blood, I consider them two role models that have pushed me, whether in the Army, whether wanting to be something as a civic leader, or wanting to be just happy with myself at the end of the day. Because regardless of what you do, it's who you are and what you want to, just do that makes you happy that really counts at the end of the day. Because I guess one of the quotes that I remember, it's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you.
Absolutely.
And I do want to do some things later in my life before, and it's always in my heart instilled by my mom and my dad, who gave me the chance. Because if they didn't give me the chance, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't even be in Cora. I wouldn't be at the studio. I'd probably be in the streets of India somewhere begging for change.
Yes.
So that's a miracle in my eyes, and that's what's going to push me to keep fighting.
Very nice. I think you are 100% number one son. 100%.
Try.
Thank you so much for being on the show. It was good to hear your stories and your transparency and your authenticity. Say that word for me.
Authenticity.
Your authenticity. So it was good to really listen to you guys. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Good luck on your life journeys. Yes. Every day you're going to give, and every day it's going to be like this wonderful gift back to you.
Thank you for helping us along our journey.
Oh, yeah. We're here for you. Thank you, everyone who's watching Stories of Transformation. We will be putting up shows maybe once every 2 months. And do visit our website at www.boonachepresents.com. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to Stories of Transformation. This is a Boonache Presents production. I'm happy to stand in for the original ghost. Oops, just keep rolling tape. Not the ghost, but the host.
So you just want to...
Yeah, I'll just keep going.